Good morning, everybody, and we are starting with the first session of this 3-day series. I'm extremely happy that my professor, Professor Sherigara, is starting the session. We are having a good start with the topic basics of science and heading towards the future. I'm sure this is a very good beginning. You would know the history, the developments of science, where are we now, and what are the problems to be faced in future, and how chemistry has solution to most of the problems that we are presently facing. I've already introduced Professor Sherigara. He has been having a lot of teaching and research experience. He has been always motivating the students, saying that we don't need sophisticated facilities to do research. We need to have good fundamental knowledge of the subject, and you need to have innovative thinking. And he has initiated interest in many of the students to take up research and excel in life. I'm sure you all will benefit from his lecture. On behalf of the Department of Chemistry, I welcome Professor Sherigara to this session. I request my colleague, Dr. Suresh Pinayak, to offer a bouquet to Professor Sherigara. Thank you. And I request Professor Sherigara to deliver the first lecture of this session. Over to Professor Sherigara.
This lecture is meant for pre-university students and undergraduate students. You are all MSc, specialized in a certain area, and research scholars and research PhDs and all that. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing is, this is supposed to be a motivation lecture. So if it becomes dragging and boring, you have to bear with me. Okay, because nowadays there is a lot of emphasis given on popularization of science. Less students are taking up the courses. More students are going towards professional courses, engineering, medical and all that. So basic science is going to suffer. Therefore, at the government level and also central government level, UGC and funding agencies, they have been trying to popularize science. So I have been asked to give some lectures to the pre-university undergraduate students and all that. So I had a ready stock, and when she invited me, I thought I should just interact with you and share my feelings. So it is science versus technology. We say that application of science is technology. Whether science came first or technology came first. So I say that technology was there from time immemorial, because I gave you some examples, that is the cooking of food, baking of pottery, smelting of ores, fermentation technique. They were all known since thousands of years ago, but the science and the mechanism of that was not known. So it came much later. Okay, but now the trend is reference. Dr. Satyasankar will tell me they have got strong R&D center in any industry. So you have a targeted research, do a lot of research, and then you scale up the production. So that's the trend is reverse. Okay, next. There is a reference in Chemistry for Changing Times, William Hills. If you read that, there is a reference, say that biblical chemistry. Those days, the desert dwellers found difficulty in getting drinking water. Though some oases where water is available, it is alkaline and they could not drink. So the commandment was that you put dead wood and then it becomes drinkable. So what is the mechanism? Chemistry was not known, but technique was known. So the dead wood is actually cellulose. This is a simplified version of cellulose. Your glucoside ring has got CH2OH throughout this one. It's a polymer. And then what happens is, under the scorching sun of the desert, it would have been oxidized to oxidized cellulose. So that will neutralize the alkali and make it drinkable. That was the technique. It was known since ages, that technique. So that's an example to say that technology was known, but chemistry came much later. Next. The incredible rust-resistant iron pillar of Delhi. Those who have visited Delhi and Qutub Minar, there is a iron pillar, this one. And some Balasubramaniam of Indian Institute of Technology has done some research, and he says It is a living testimony to the skill of metallurgists of ancient India. 1600 years, only 1/10 of millimeter rust has formed in that. So it is so strong and remaining so stable. So the corrosion resistance, it is found to result from the higher hydrogen phosphate, or the amount of phosphorus present, larger amount of phosphorus present in that. Because there is a non-destructive technique. At the needle point you take a small amount of the rust, and neutron activation analysis, one can find out the component present on the surface. That is a technique. So okay, next. So it belongs to actually Gupta period. It is considered as golden age of India, where science, mathematics, astronomy, religion and all flourished. In 1600 years, the film has grown just 1/20th of millimeter thickness. Okay, so that means, what is the reason how that extra phosphorus was introduced into that material? So maybe some locally available wood, that is Cassia auriculata, maybe that was used while smelting, and that introduced some extra amount of the phosphorus, and that is responsible for the corrosion resistance. That is their findings, research findings. Next. Alchemy. So ancient chemistry is known as alchemy. So it started from, chemistry started from those periods, a mystical chemistry that flourished in Europe in the Middle Ages, 500 to 1500 AD. So actually it was a kind of a magic. They wanted a philosopher's stone. That means if you touch that philosopher's stone, any material, it will turn into gold. That means obsession for gold was there since those days also. And also elixir, amrita, they wanted to prepare it in the laboratory so that if you drink you become immortal and all that. So have they achieved it? But it cannot be, because it was only a myth. But in the process, all this, some techniques like such as distillation, crystallization and precipitation, and all these techniques were extraction. All these techniques were developed by those people. So they had some contribution towards the chemistry. That you have to see. And next, you see the artist's conception of the alchemists, how they worked those days. This is King Midas. Have you studied, come across the story of King Midas? It's a Greek story, because he just had a boon from the god that anything he should touch should turn into gold. He was already rich, but he had greed for more gold. So he touches everything and it turned. He was very happy. And then he was very hungry, wanted to drink some water, some food, and it was also converted into gold. And he wanted to hug his dear daughter, and it was turned into a statue, golden statue. So like that, too much of greed is, so that was the lesson. And I just gave a comparison how the greed for this one, gold, is so bad, not so good. Next. And maybe about the structure of the atom, the first conceived by one Kashyapa or the Kannada, 6th century Dwaraka. And he introduced the word Anu, Dvayanuka, Trianuka, Rasavidya, that is alchemy. And even the Gurutva, concept of Gurutva was known. And 5 elements identified those days were water, fire, earth, air and ether, that is a medium. Okay? But Indian concept of atom was developed independently and possibly prior to the development of the idea in the Greco-Roman world. Next. Okay. And I am saying it with the historic perspective. Therefore, Aristotle, because according to Britannica Encyclopedia, Aristotle was the first genius scientist in history, and every scientist in depth, they say, because the natural philosophy or the philosophical speculation about nature led to modern science from 17th century, and he was the author of that natural philosophy. Next. Yes, what I am saying is, it is not, may not be realistic, but this statement is important. The extraordinary confidence in the sheer power of science that he had. So that is a message given to the people, that you should have extraordinary confidence that by doing research and finding new innovative ideas, you will be able to achieve something. That's it. Archimedes. This is for SLs and pre-university student. You don't bother about that. Next. Another is this Francis Bacon, 1500 to 1600. Actually, he inspired the scientific revolution actually. So he is known, but mostly empiricism was, he propagated empiricism. Initially, the science was nothing but empirical methods. Next. Malthus, I don't know whether you have heard, author of population theory. So he said that the population grows by geometric proportion, whereas food production goes by arithmetic proportion. So in 200 years, there is going to be chaos. There is no enough food to eat, and people will perish, and that is the prediction he said. However, he cautioned, scientific and technological properly applied will save us from disaster. So that was his prediction. Now it's 200, because he belonged to 1800 something. So 200 years, so nothing has happened. We have enough food to eat, thanks to the Green Revolution and contribution of the science. Next. Democritus, he said that, he hypothesized that all matter is composed of tiny, indestructible and called atoms. Indestructible atoms. So ultimate of all matter is atom, he said, which is indestructible. And we believed that. That is a myth in chemistry. I am going to emphasize the myth in chemistry. We believed that. For how many years? For 2000 years. Next. First, this one hypothesis as atomic theory, in the name of atomic theory, was propounded by one Dalton in 1801, and he said that all matter is made of atoms. Atoms are indivisible and indestructible. And he said that all atoms of a given element are identical in mass and properties. We still believed it. It took another 100 years to say that both concepts, both these hypotheses are wrong. Okay, next. Previous one. See, we had artificial transmutation, the first nuclear reaction, where a nuclei of nitrogen was converted into oxygen. That means transmutation. That is actually what alchemists conceived. Transformation of baser metals into gold. One element to other element. So that was possible in 1919 by Rutherford. And he got a Nobel Prize for all these contributions. So of course induced radioactivity by Irene Curie and Juliet in 1934, another Nobel Prize winning equation. So that means this is possible. So Democritus' concept is wrong, and Dalton's theory also, even the second concept, that is elements are identical, isotopes are not identical. So that is an exception to the second hypothesis. So all these are the developments. So this is what I say is the myth in chemistry. The myth in chemistry. Okay. Lavoisier. Actually, Anthony Lavoisier is considered as father of modern chemistry. And what he did, he gave the complete explanation for combustion. Earlier it was phlogiston theory. They said that some kind of phlogiston, some imaginary substance was present in material, therefore combustion takes place. But it's not that way. He said that oxygen is responsible for that. So there is actually oxidation and all that. He said water is a compound of hydrogen and oxygen. Now we know that, but he was the first person to identify that. He was the first person to name hydrogen, and importantly, he formulated the basic law of modern chemistry, that is known as the law of conservation of mass. Law of conservation of mass. Even to this day, we just it is followed. Okay. Next. Exception proves the rule. That is another myth, because at that time everybody wanted that it should be compound should be linear, and that concept of the cyclic structure came. They say that it came in a dream, and then those days when there was no X-ray, no spectra, IR or NMR, mass, and was not there, just by what is known as wet chemistry, he could establish the structure of benzene, and that was a actually starting point actually. We say that it is an epoch-making invention. Organic chemistry were now able to go ahead and make thousands of derivatives of benzene for industrial and medical and other uses. But it would not have been possible had he not given. Maybe it would have extended for a few more years and all that. That's why you just have that. Next. Bread from the air, gold from the sea was the slogan those days, in his days. German chemist. Bread from the air means what? From nitrogen, from the air, nitrogen, hydrogen, ammonia. Ammonia, you have urea, fertilizer. So from fertilizer, you have the food. So indirectly, bread from the air, from nitrogen, that is fixation of nitrogen. Otherwise, natural fixation is so slow and it cannot feed the billions. So 8 billion, the population of the world is 8 billion. And it was so eventful, that was so significant, that research, this nitrogen plus hydrogen, that is ammonia, was so significant. And he got a Nobel Prize for that, 1919. That's one thing. And it was so significant that, next. Actually, one fifth of the population owe their existence to that discovery. Because otherwise, by whatever we say about organic farming and all that, without fertilizer, I think it would not have been possible to feed the billions, 8 billion population of the world. That's one thing. And but you know that both sides of the science, both the positive side and the negative side, invented both saved millions and were eventually used to kill millions. He was the profounder of chemical warfare also, and plus the same ammonia used for the explosives, ammonium nitrate or nitrates. So therefore was making nitrogen compound, used fertilizers and also for explosives. Therefore he was a controversial figure, and even Nobel Prize, award of Nobel Prize to him was actually opposed by certain conventional traditional chemists of those days, scientists of those days. But he said that the Nobel got the money, that money which he instituted as a Nobel Prize came from the dynamite, that is explosives only. So that is the what we say, that irony, the irony of the situation those days. Next. Another myth in chemistry, vital force theory. Those days, people believed that organic substances, organic compounds were synthesized only in nature, and human beings cannot prepare that artificially in the laboratory. That was the thinking. So some kind of vital force there in the plants and in organic materials, natural materials. So that is how it produces this one. The organic compounds, natural organic compounds. So that was the thinking. But for the first time, he prepared Wohler. He prepared by heating ammonium cyanate, urea in the laboratory, in the test tube. Otherwise, urea comes from the organisms actually. So he was so excited, and he wrote a letter to his guru, Berzelius, saying that I have prepared urea in the laboratory without the assistance of organisms and without the help of a kidney. That is what he said. He was so excited. So that was the starting point. Again, a myth is broken. Earlier the myth was that it cannot be prepared artificially in the laboratory, but the myth was broken. Okay, next. And professor of he was a professor in the one of the American premier research institutes, universities. Actually, he did some basic research actually, that is solubility of gases. So those days they were using the natural air for breathing, for sea diving, and because of the presence of nitrogen there, it used to cause enormous pain and difficulty in breathing. Then because of the data available in the solubility of the gases, he said that it is mixture of oxygen and helium would be a better substitute. So now in sea diving they use this. So that is why he said most of our modern technology is based on results obtained in the basic research. So we do basic research, and tomorrow it will have some important applications. So basic research of today is the tomorrow's technology. It's tomorrow's technology. That is what you understand by this. Next. So basic research is done for the sheer joy of unraveling the secrets of nature and discovering order in our universe. That was the thinking those days. However, now you see for the social relevance, application, immediate application, and welfare of the humanity and all that. The essence of, okay, most of the modern technology is based on the results obtained in basic research. Semiconductor physics of previous years is the much acclaimed information and communication technology of today. Synthetic chemistry of yesteryears is the pharmaceutical and medicinal chemistry of today. Basic research on structure and atom by J.J. Thomson, Rutherford, Niels Bohr, Enrico Fermi and all that led to the nuclear technology of today. Okay? So you cannot ignore basic research. So you do it, and tomorrow you may find some suitable application from that. How costly is the research? So everybody is worried about the economic aspect of that. How costly is the research? If you actually calculate, all the research done since the time of Aristotle has cost less than 2 weeks of output in the modern industrial world. That's the calculation. Okay? So therefore, one need not worry about the cost effect of that. So just one can fund the research projects because it will have the benefit in the coming years. Next. Okay, discovery of electron. Next. The electron discovery of 1897 showed that the atom can be split into even smaller parts. That was the starting point for the structure of the atom. So atom is not indivisible, indestructible, but it is a composite. It has got the other fundamental particles like electron and neutron, proton and all that. Okay. It was the first step towards detailed model of the atom. Showed that 2000 years old conception of the atom as a homogeneous particle was wrong, and that in fact the atom has complex structure. So Thomson was awarded 1906. It is a epoch making, we say. I am stressing that point, epoch making discovery. So Nobel Prize in Physics for the discovery of the electron and for his work on the conduction of electricity in gases. 7 of his students and his son George Paget Thomson also became Nobel Prize winners. So he was a great teacher. Okay. Structure of the nucleus, Thomson, J.J. Thomson. Next. It's Rutherford. So his contribution was also was of very high standard, and he actually differentiated named alpha and beta particles, and about the he discovered the concept of radioactive half-life, and he stated that actually alpha radiation is nothing but helium nucleus, and he discovered the proton, that's very important, and laid the foundation for the structure of the nucleus. And even his own student James Chadwick, who discovered neutron, even neutron was discovered under his supervision only. So therefore his contribution was so much. Even the John Comfort and Aaron Walton, that is the discovery of the basic model of the mass spectrometer was from these scientists, was done under his supervision. Okay, so these are all the contributions of Rutherford. And periodic table of elements, it is also a turning point because those days only 64 elements were known during the time of this one, and he predicted the properties of the another 8 elements, and of course the periodic table has gone drastic change in the later years. Now you have, okay, next, the modern periodic table, it has got all elements, naturally occurring elements up to 94, and from 95 to, what is the last? 118. 95 to 118 are the artificially synthesized elements. Okay, so you should be very conversant with this periodic table. And there is something called as modern alchemy. Why it is called modern alchemy? Because this we can call him as a giant in that scientist, because he wanted to prepare gold from lead. So actually he succeeded in transmuting a minute quantity of lead, possibly en route from bismuth, into gold. The accelerated particle impacts the target material, potentially knocking the free protons or neutrons and making new element isotope. So that was possible. That's why we call it as modern alchemy. Actually, he co-discovered 10 transuranic elements: plutonium, americium, curium, berkelium, californium, einsteinium, fermium, and mendelevium, nobelium, and of course one of that is known as seaborgium. Later it was named as seaborgium. Okay, so he was really great. 10 elements were discovered by him. Okay, next. The osmosis, the phenomenon of osmosis is known to us. Actually, osmosis discovered in 1824 by Henry Detroit, 1776 to 1847. But what is the importance of that? Now we say that water everywhere and not any drop to drink. Captain James Cook said that. He was a sea voyager. You have in sea lot of water, but you cannot drink that. So in Gulf countries actually they prepare drinking water from sea water. Okay, because water is scarce there. So now we have a problem. Ethinavale project or Kalasa Banduri project, Kaveri water project. So in future, I think they are going to wage war for the sake of water. So it is going to be a problem. However, the concept was known those days. The basic science was known, but technology is coming now. That is reverse osmosis. Otherwise, what happens is water molecules will diffuse through the semi-permeable membrane, and that is known as osmosis. And osmotic pressure is going to develop. If you offset that osmotic pressure by putting some extra energy from this side, then reverse process will start. So from the salt water, the pure water will flow into the other side, so you can use it. That is what is known as reverse osmosis. So technology comes this way. Okay. He was a PhD student. Many of the PhD students are there in one of the Russian Moscow University or so. Michael Svet, 1872 to 1919. So his problem was from the green coloring material of the plants, he wanted to separate the ingredients. Maybe it is chlorophyll A or chlorophyll B or carotenoids, it may be there. He wanted to separate them. So he devised a method. He took a cylindrical, glass container. He packed it with certain materials just like calcium carbonate or alumina and all that, some porous materials. So he wanted to just added the solution of the alcohol extract or ether extract of the plant material. So that means there are two phases. One is stationary phase. What is that stationary phase? That porous material is called as the stationary phase, and the solvent that is trapped there is called as the mobile phase. Okay, when the solution just flows, they get separated, and you will get all these three band-like structure. And those days he called it as word chroma. That means chroma means color, and graphy means writing, color writing. So he gave the word chromatography, and that was a simple PhD work, a basic work. And what is the impact? Next you see, the whole field of chromatographic technique owes the findings or a contribution to that PhD work. Actually, you should say that. All this paper chromatography, thin layer chromatography, gas chromatography, column chromatography, high pressure liquid chromatography, ion chromatography, on gel permeation chromatography, all these are the offshoot of that research. You know that. Okay. Next. And just we give the gel permeation chromatography. It is also extended form of the column chromatography, where you have these beads, the beads made out of styrene divinyl benzene polymer. which is containing micro holes, so micro pores, and the beads itself constitute the, it is not the stationary phase actually. The solvent enters into the micro pores and that will constitute the stationary phase, and the solvent at the void space, it will be the mobile phase. Okay. Now what happens is, if you just put a polymer solution into that, the polymer, smaller molecule, because polymer is composite because it is polydisperse, we say. There are very small molecules, moderate molecules and very big sized molecules. So the small sized molecule will enter the pores and it will spend more time there before it diffuses out. So bigger molecule cannot enter the pores, it will simply come out. The first fraction will be the big sized molecules, and then the moderate sized molecule, and last comes the smallest molecules. It is a way of separation of the polydisperse system. So actually, because of the availability of this particular system, new inventions could be made, because the discovery of fullerene was because of the availability of a gel permeation chromatography, C13 NMR, and mass spectrograph and all that. So they could characterize it. So because of that, they could separate C60 from C70 and other bigger molecules. So therefore the separation was possible. So new inventions came. So these tools, the sophisticated tools, are also very important for the discovery and the inventions. Okay, next. Okay, this is about the new, because it was a startling and a far-reaching development of quantum theory is a breakthrough and considered as the greatest intellectual achievement of 20th century, because black body radiation could not be explained using the wave theory of light. Max Planck, however, realized that black body radiation could be understood by treating light like a stream of energy packets, E is equal to h nu, now called as photons or quanta, and this was the contribution. And it was again, as I said, it was revolutionized the technology. It was also a turning point in the emergence of the new concepts. Had a enormous impact. Almost all other areas of science, from chemistry to biology to cosmology, are they owe their existence to that findings. Okay, application of quantum theory have revolutionized the technology. Next. Yes, next. So Einstein is best known for special theory of general relativity and the concept of mass energy. This one equation that is famous, E is equal to mc square, is given by that, and this is the basis for the nuclear technology of today. Actually, how you can transfer matter into energy or energy into matter and all that. So based on the particulate nature of light, he explained the photoelectric effect by proposing that light interacts with matter as discrete packets of or quanta of energy rather than as wave. So direct application of the quantum theory to the photoelectric effect. It's the Nobel Prize winning equation work. Next. So earlier, before 1940, there were two axioms. Matter can neither be created nor destroyed, or energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Now you have to club those two axioms, and you have, when there is transformation of matter into energy, there results the destruction of matter and creation of energy. Why 1940? Because 1940 is the discovery of nuclear fission. Nuclear fission is nothing but a small amount of matter is converted into a huge amount of energy. So that is the direct application of E is equal to mc square. Okay. Next. Okay, next. So it's only a tool for the chemist and also the medical science also. See, MRI scan gives a detailed image of the body's soft tissues and bones. For diagnostic purposes, can detect structural abnormalities in the body. How the application goes on expanding. So it may be having some limited application at the beginning, but it goes on expanding. Okay. Energy is the priority nowadays. So it may be solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy or tidal energy or nuclear energy. Next. But the emphasis is more given, of course, nuclear fission. It's a controversial issue. Nuclear energy is a controversial issue, whether people accept it or not, but we have it. Because only recently, in 1913, a new nuclear plant was commissioned at, what is that, Kudankulam, Kumbakonam, that is Tamil Nadu. A lot of fishermen actually opposed that, and there was agitation for several years. But still, the government wanted, and Supreme Court also gave a verdict saying that it is in the larger interest of the humanity, in the society, larger interest of the society. There is an energy crisis, so we need energy. Therefore, you take all precautions and just have it and all that. Okay. So all these problems are there, but in spite of that, we need, because we need the alternatives for our energy requirements, alternatives. Okay. Next. So solar energy seems to be the ultimate this one renewable resource, and lot of emphasis is given by the government and the central government also. So particularly they are popularizing the solar energy, and we have to harness it for our day-to-day applications. Next. Only 47% of the total solar energy that reaches the earth, so other are scattered or they reflected or wasted. Anyway, you have to take care of that. Next. So this is the simple this one model of the solar, this one photovoltaic cell. Okay, next. Or one can go to what is known as photoelectrochemical cell, where there is a semiconductor electrode. If you shine it with solar radiation, then it will assist in splitting the water. That is, you will get hydrogen and oxygen by photoelectricity, by this photoelectrochemical method. So splitting the water means you will get hydrogen and oxygen, which can be used as a this one fuel for the fuel cell, in fuel cell. That is the application. You have to think of all these possibilities. Next. Next. Okay. Next. This is the fuel cell, this one system. Okay. Next. Nickel cadmium cell is no longer nowadays used because of the this one because of the hazardous nature of this cadmium. So now what you use in your this one batteries for the purpose of your mobile cells and also your this one computers and all that is the lithium ion battery. Next. Lithium ion battery. So it is used for powering your mobile phones. So actually graphite is the anode there, and there is a graphite is the cathode, and lithium cobalt oxide or lithium metal oxide is used as the anode, and this is the cell reaction, and actually lithium ions are the charge carriers there. So you are using some solvents, organic solvents like ethylene carbonate or diethyl carbonate, and you are using non-aqueous electrolytes like lithium phosphorus fluoride or lithium arsenic fluoride or lithium perchlorate or lithium borofluorate, and all these compounds, fluoride, all these compounds can be used as non-aqueous electrolytes for that purpose. But the problem is lithium is not very abundant in nature. Now you get in only South America, Bolivia and Chile, and China also has got a reserve of lithium, and Australia has lithium, but unfortunately India doesn't have lithium. So they are now working for the alternatives, whether potassium ion can be used instead of lithium ions, and now it has started giving some good results, and maybe in the next decade we will be using, instead of lithium, the potassium ion batteries, and then this cost problem will not be there. It will be much cheaper and all that. Next. Okay, next. So these are all some of the gadgets which are used in analytical chemistry as tools, and you have to just work out the theory part of it also, and try to understand the system and try to use that. Next. So this is the electrochemical device, that is a cyclic voltammetric experiments that we conducted in our laboratory. It's an oxidation reduction process that is taking place, and it gives the one can do the quantification also. It can be used as a analytical tool, and it can be used as a mechanistic tool also. Okay, next. And the sophisticated that is analytical tool available nowadays is known as inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. You know, that is the tool that is used for the identification and quantification of the chemical substances. Okay, now next. You know this gentleman, Ben Johnson, may not be knowing, because he was 1988, he was a 100 meters world champion and also Olympic champion. So unfortunately both the medals were withdrawn for doping, because he was proved to be doping these energy enhancers. And how one could identify that, detect that? That is because of the availability of sophisticated detecting devices. Next. That is, for example, these are some of the energy enhancers, drugs that were used. And next. And the instrument that was used for detecting this sample from the urine sample, the analysis of the urine sample, and detecting a minute quantity of the drug sample present in the body was GCMS. That is the GCMS. Okay, gas chromatography and mass, combination of these two equipment that is used on a routine basis by the researchers. You know. Okay, next. Polymer science. So 1900 to 2000, you can call it as polymer age. Maybe you are starting from Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, things like that. So that 1900 to 2000 can be called as, that is polymer age. What is the present age now? You call it as computer age, ICT age, or space age. Oh man, it is left you. Okay, that was the polymer starting point. And Leo Baekeland is considered as the father of polymer science, because the first synthetic plastic or the polymer was prepared by him, Leo Baekeland. What is that? This is a monument preserved as the reactor used by Leo Baekeland. Next. That was the phenolic resin that was synthesized by phenol formaldehyde was first prepared. That was the first starting point. First synthetic polymer prepared by Leo Baekeland is known as Bakelite. It was used as a plastic, modern plastic, as an insulator. Okay. And there is a very interesting story, because I told you it is it goes like a story. It is a historic perspective. There are very interesting stories in polymer science. So what is this actually? Christian Friedrich Schonbein, and actually he was working those days. Kitchens were the laboratories those days, in 1800 to 1900, something like that. And the nitration mixture just fell on the table, dining table. He wanted to mop it up, and he used his wife's apron to mop up the nitration mixture, and just he wanted to dry near the fireplace, and it just caught fire and vanished into the thin air. And he was astonished, what has happened? Only thing is, he had a genius mind, so he recapitulated. So what happened is, actually the cellulose, that is the cotton, must have been converted into nitrocellulose, the gun cotton, which is the explosive substance, and because of the compound which is rich in nitrogen, so nitrate, so therefore it must have caught fire and all that. That is the starting point. So it was just a modification of the natural polymer into the modified polymer, that's all. So that's a very interesting story. We call it as serendipity, accidental discovery. Next. From coal, air and water. What is this material actually? That is nylon. So nylon discovery, 1920s, it was one of the sensational discoveries those days. Okay. Earlier they were using for all these purposes the natural silk, and once it was discovered. Next. So this is the pre-university chemistry that you understand, that is preparation of nylon 6,6. So monomeric units repeating that make up the polymer are not identical. Okay, that's the concept. Next. And you should also read the, one suggestion I want to give to you is, you should also read the life history of all these scientists. He is known as Carothers. He was actually those days, he synthesized a number of synthetic polymers starting from nylon 6,6 and polyesters, polyamides and all that, 1930s. He was employed by the DuPont company, and he discovered all these things. But only thing is, those days also there was a kind of criticism amongst the chemists also. So there was some criticism. So he could not withstand that criticism, and he committed suicide at the age of 41 years. In a very young age, he died actually. Otherwise, he would have won one Nobel Prize for his discovery. So that's why his life, this one history is very important. So you should go through that. Okay, next. So this is one material which is highly heat resistant. It can resist heat up to 2200 degrees. So it is silicone material. Those days it was used as shielding materials of the space vehicles, earlier days. Okay, next. Silicone rubber. Next. Artificial skin, I am saying. Okay. These are some of the applications of the specialty polymers. Okay, next. Lexan is polycarbonate actually. See the structure, the strength and the resistance is because of the extra stability of the molecule, is because of the structure maybe. So it is harder than steel but transparent than the glass. So maybe bulletproof glass a material, as a, you can use it as a bulletproof material. Okay. Adhesives, you know, just one drop of adhesives can stand the weight of half a ton. So what is that material actually? It is a marketed name, trade name for it actually. You see here this C triple bond N, you know, it establishes a very strong bond with the surface of the material and binds it. Binding property. Okay. Bulletproof vests, that is a polymer where hydrogen bonds increase the strength. It is polyamide, aromatic polyamide. Okay. Next. Or fire resistance materials can also be prepared by just blending that polyamide with glass wool, used as fireproof clothing for firemen. Next. Next. Can run it. Okay. Isoprene. There is also one myth in chemistry. Actually, they wanted to prepare this material in the laboratory. Tilden, I think. One Tilden just tried it in the laboratory, but he got a very poor yield. So he declared that there is no point in preparing the laboratory rubber starting from polyisoprene, because those days the mechanism of polymerization or initiators, this catalyst and all that was not known. The mechanism was not known. That may be the reason. And he said that, so you, instead of preparing it in the laboratory, you better grow more rubber trees. When that comes from a reputed scientist says that, then other people will believe that and they stop the research. So it was hindered to an extent. That's why we say that it is another myth. But now you can do it very easily in the laboratory using the initiators. Okay, next. Vulcanization of the rubber is another turning point actually. So by the Goodyear, next. Charles Goodyear, you know. So it is a tragic life actually. He spent his whole life in the research and then finally succeeded in vulcanization of the that rubber. But he did not see the result or the outcome and by that time he was a insolvent, and there was a huge loan, and he even the patent he wanted to get it, he lost the case in the court itself. So therefore he died heartbroken. But in another 2 decades, this vulcanized rubber was used in the pneumatic tires, and there was a revolution in the transport industry. And all those industries, they minted millions of dollars of money. So these are the research, these are results of the research, basic research carried out by Charles Goodyear. Though he sacrificed his life, the future generation was benefited by that. Okay. Now you have all the synthetic rubbers. 2/3 of the requirement of the world is met by the synthetic rubber, and only 1/3 is met by the natural rubber. So you have butadiene styrene copolymer rubber, you have isoprene, that is monoisoprene, or isobutyl rubber, and all types of synthetic rubbers are available, and the technology is known, the mechanism of polymerization is also known. So therefore you can just go ahead with that. So these are all the outcome of the research carried out in 1930s. Okay. Next. Everybody speaks about nanoscience. When we were MSc students, when I did research, it was not known because that field was not there. Only last 10 years they speak about nanoscience and technology. And as I told you, just mentioned in my talk, as a Vice Chancellor, I submitted a project to the CNR Rao committee. There is a nano commission at the DST where they are funding the research projects in nanoscience and technology. So they gave us 3 crores for a M.Tech program at Kuvempu University, and we could buy few of the equipments, and some 5 batches have passed out M.Tech in nanoscience and technology. So that's it. So you must have some exposure to nanoscience also. Anyway, okay, next. Okay. All this, you can run this one. One thing I want to tell you is, this technology, though it is of recent development, the concept was known from time immemorial. I have given one example, that is, it belonged to the Roman period, where it is just preserved in a museum, and they say that actually it is made out of the nano lead sulfide and galena materials. So it looks like green in the reflected light and red in the transmitted light. So that means the technology was known, maybe the technology was known, but the science is of recent origin. That is what I wanted to tell. Just next. So these are some of the equipments which we bought out of that M.Tech project to our laboratory. Okay, next. Transmission electron microscope. Next. Atomic force microscope. Yes, next. Okay. Next. So this was the first batch of M.Tech students in Kuvempu University. We had one M.Tech program there, and it is successfully being conducted. Okay, next. So what we understand by this discussion is, science is not absolute. Science is testable, explanatory, and tentative. Science is not absolute. It is cumulative, growing, changing, alive, and never final. Old concepts and old facts are discarded. New tools and new techniques reveal new data and generate new concepts. Okay. You know him, Alfred Nobel. He instituted a huge fund for the award of Nobel Prize. And next, you have a list of Nobel laureates, 2012 data. Actually, where we stand actually, we won 8 Nobel Prizes so far. And a major chunk goes to USA, 320. Let us see the tally. Next. This 7 you can just exclude because he was not actually Indian, you know. His forefather actually migrated from India, and we have total 8. The latest being Kailash Satyarthi, Nobel Peace Prize. For the population of 120 crores, are you satisfied with the 8 Nobel Prizes? So, you should try to get Nobel Prize, okay, by doing research. Next. The trend was that is the oldest university. It is in Patna, near Patna. What is it is known as Nalanda University. Have you visited? If you happen to visit Bihar, you just visit that place. Okay. Students used to visit that university from all over the world. Now the trend is different. Students from India go abroad. Okay. So how many students going annually from India abroad? 2 lakh and above. Okay. We stand third. First is China. And next South Korea. And third is India. That means more number of students are going abroad for higher studies. So I want that the trend should be different. We must have the global international standard universities and institutes in our country, so that people come from other countries to India, and all that is the responsibility is on younger people, the present generation. Okay, next. Thank you.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ ತಗೊಳ್ಳಿ ಸರ್ ಇದು ಲೆಕ್ಚರ್
Okay, thank you.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸೊ ಮಚ್.
Okay.